It's time for Health Futures with Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Health Futures. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and it must be Friday. We're coming at you live from the Scottsdale Air Park, and if you are just tuning into the show for the very first time, Health Futures is a show about how our older adult population can live a healthier, happier life. And how do we do this? We do this by bringing extraordinary guests. We're in our fifth year. We've brought probably about 200 shows here to the Valley, and those extraordinary guests are what make up our show, and today is no different. I want to just really cut right to the chase. Today I have in the studio, I've got a return visitor, Steve Wagner. He's from Right Care Foundation, and he's also a first responder with Phoenix Fire. 13 years, 14 years? I always forget. 15?
Working on 16.
16 years. Steve Wagner, welcome to the show.
Still a new guy.
There you go. And I also have just to his right, my left, somebody I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. She is a celebrity here in town because she is the president and CEO of a continuing care community that has really deep roots in the Valley by the name of Beatitudes Campus. Welcome to the show, Michelle Just.
Thanks for having us.
Well, it's good to have both of you on because I want to really talk about this initiative that Steve Wagner came up with, and I'm going to have him talk about how this whole idea became to be. But, really, what we're going to talk about here today is before the fire truck arrives. It's more than CPR. It's keeping the brain alive along with the pulse. So, Steve, toss it over to you and pivot over to you. Talk to us how this concept came to be. Creating a non-for-profit's not an easy thing, and you really learned the hard way. You got a lot of advice. You surrounded yourself with really good people like Michelle and, of course, me, but many others that help you bring to fruition this concept of Right Care Foundation.
Thank you for the introduction, Bob. And I have to acknowledge Michelle here and the Beatitudes Campus. If it wasn't for their willingness to engage in a conversation about best practice and what can we do, what can community do, what can industry do before the fire truck arrives, we wouldn't have the success that we have today. So I'll step back and just say it really is that 16 years that I'm working on, 17 actually with another fire department before the city of Phoenix. But so I've been running a lot of calls, 911 calls, medical emergencies, etc. And all of that field experience caused me to become very passionate about what I saw when I arrived on the scene was being done or not being done prior to our arrival. And we know clinically that certain things have to be done if somebody intends to return to normal living. Certain things need to be done prior to the fire truck's arrival if their wishes are going to be honored. So we set out to change the world, and I sought the recommendation of the Phoenix Fire Department EMS division, and I asked the fire department. I said, "Who do you think would be the best possible candidate that would be interested in engaging this conversation about best practice? We want to create a new level of practice, and we have some ideas. Who should we talk to?" And they said, without a doubt, Beatitudes Campus. So I had reached out to, I don't know if it was even you, Michelle, directly at that point.
I don't think it was the first time around.
Yeah, I finally found my way to you. But I think you were at our first meeting when we had this conversation. But so I took all of my passion about best practice and my zeal for making sure that we could save lives and honor wishes better in community. And Michelle said, absolutely, this is a great idea. And we built an accreditation program around Beatitudes Campus. We can get into details later, but I'm thrilled to say that we believe, and this will be Right Care speaking here, that Beatitudes Campus is engaged in saving lives and honoring wishes. Beatitudes Campus is engaged in being the safest place where your loved one can reside, and they do a tremendous job. So
if I had to ask you to give your stump or elevator speech, so our listening audience, because I do want you to go into detail, describe, if you would, in 30 seconds or less, what is Right Care Foundation? What exactly do you guys do?
Well, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We believe, as I've mentioned numerous times, that saving lives, neurologically intact, we believe there's no other possible definition of survival other than returning to normal living, or that your wishes could be honored. Well, that's a little bit of a challenge in the community today. So we believe in access to immediate resuscitation, access to defibrillation, access to pre-first responder response before the fire truck arrives. There's this 0 minute that we talk about. And when we say 0 minute, it's a bit confusing, but what it really means is that's the amount of time that you have to take action. You need to take action to provide resuscitation to keep the brain alive before the fire truck arrives. You need to take action to make sure that documentation is in order to honor the wishes of folks. So we're working on some policy initiatives, Bob, as you well know, considering our work together. But access to immediate resuscitation, access to best practice, policy that will support that, and the immediate action in that 0 minute that can make a difference in somebody's life.
So I'm going to back up a little bit. And, one of the things that Michelle said before we started the show that she loves about you is your passion. And I love your passion too. And there's no doubt our listening audience, they feel and hear your passion. So why? And you've told me why. Why did you go forth with Right Care Foundation? I mean, I can repeat what you said to me, and you can tell me if I say it right. And that is, you said that you're tired of going to respond to these life-saving events, if you would, and nobody was doing resuscitation. And you, as a first responder fire department EMT guy, can bring this person back, but if they have suffered oxygen deprivation to the brain for 9 minutes or more, 7 minutes or more, you can probably get them back to breathing again, but what quality of life would they have? Isn't that the reason why you're doing this?
Yeah, yes, and I'll speak directly to that. During sudden cardiac arrest, the heart is no longer providing oxygenated blood to the brain. Well, the issue that we want to impress upon community to take action and industry to take action has to do with making sure that the brain stays alive until the fire truck arrives on the scene. And yes, I have seen challenges with patients who have not received resuscitation prior to arrival. Well, we're pretty good about starting a heart again, and we have great protocols that are provided by medical direction. We start hearts again all the time. The question is if nothing's being done prior to our arrival, every minute that goes by, the brain is dying 10%. So 5 minutes means you have a 50% chance of survival. So again, 0 minutes is the time that folks in community or in industry have to do something, take action, and begin resuscitation prior to the arrival of a fire truck.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about this when we come back from our break. I can't believe we're down our first segment. Michelle, I know this is your first time on. Not your first time probably doing radio,
True.
But time does fly. And you know what? In the second segment, we're going to have you talk a little bit.
Okay.
Steve,
Happy to.
Steve definitely sucked a little bit of the oxygen out of the room because he is passionate. And
Aggressively, passionately passionate.
And he is, and he's all about saving lives. So Thank you for the first segment. Stay tuned. We'll be back for segment 2. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I got Michelle Just and Steve Wagner here in the studio. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. We're in our second segment. If you're just tuning in right now, I got Michelle Just. She's the president and CEO of Beatitudes Campus. And I've got Steve Wagner, the president and founder of the Right Care Foundation. And what we were talking about in the first segment, we talked about before the fire truck arrives. It's more than CPR. It's about keeping the brain alive along with the pulse, and talking about resuscitation. And Steve was walking us through, the creation of the foundation and how it came to be and some of the work that you're doing. One of the things that I know our listening audience loves, and I do as well, is stories. And, sometimes you need to maybe change the names or maybe the exact events, but, can you share with us some stories that you as a first responder witnessed that really propelled you to say, hey, I need to do this?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll just cut right into a dispatch that I personally was involved in. It was very early in the morning, about 7 o'clock, and we were dispatched to a seizure call to an assisted living facility in our First Due area. And we arrived on the scene, and for the sake of time, it was about 6 or 7 minutes by the time we were able to get to the patient. Well, I realized immediately that I had an elderly woman with her face sitting in a bowl of oatmeal with a couple of caregivers sitting to her left. And this wasn't a seizure. It was what we would call a code, or somebody who has no pulse and is not breathing. So immediately I grabbed the patient, and we do what we have to do, and we're well trained to do it.
I can totally visualize this, just so you know. I'm visualizing it in my mind. Go ahead.
So we begin this resuscitation, and before and as I'm beginning chest compressions, which are immediately necessary to keep the brain alive, I asked, does this patient have advanced directives? And that was the response. There was no response, and
I thought maybe you forgot what you were going to say.
Frequently, unfortunately, there's 2 responses to that question that are acceptable. One, absolutely, and here it is. This is the patient's statutorily required orange DNR form. Or, no, they don't have advanced directives, and they need to be resuscitated. And we would hope in that situation that this patient would have already been on the ground and chest compressions would have been underway, but that was not the case in this situation. So we do everything we need to do. Pardon me if I might get a little clinical here, but so we break every rib from this woman's sternum, compressing her heart so that way blood is pushed to her brain and keeping her brain alive as best we can under the circumstances. We intubate, which means put a tube down her trachea to be able to breathe for her. We give her various medicines through an interosseous needle, which is drilled into her leg. And we find success in that, as I'd mentioned in the previous segment, we get pulses back on folks quite often, and we were successful. We had pulses. And so while we're loading the patient, apparently a grandson comes in the door of the room where we were doing our work with his grandmother and said,
How old's the grandson? So we can visualize
He was probably
this.
Late 20s, early 30s,
okay,
that I recall. And he said, hey, that's my grandma. She has a DNR. So my response was, well, sir, she's alive, so we're going to the hospital. The tragedy in this is, apparently, Mrs. Smith, as I will call her, never wanted this resuscitation to begin with, but due to that lack of information at time of need, we were as a sworn duty to act, we had to resuscitate her. So she's going to the hospital with all of what I just described, and now the family is left with the decision that they have to make to end this life potentially. We know because of the response time and the situation that we found on arrival that she's neurologically injured. So this is not going to be a good outcome. This is one of those patients that's not going to return to normal living, even though we were successful in the resuscitation.
So, if I may, this event is what really propelled you to say, you know what, I've got to do things differently. And not only propelled you to do this, for our listening audience, Steve Wagner and I serve on the Governor's Advisory Council on Aging. And the Governor's Council on Aging, we have, taken the initiative of this month that we just came out of in April being National Healthcare Decision Day, so that we, for that first part, can make sure that people's wishes are known, they're documented, and I devoted 3 shows to this, and Stephanie Bivens, elder law attorney Bivens and Associates, said it's a gift that we give to our family by doing this.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I don't want to spend too much time on that, but we need people to make sure those wishes are known and select an advocate for them. Obviously, this community that you were in did not have the right paperwork. And secondly, you saw an opportunity to save this person, but you knew clinically they were going to have some brain complications.
Correct. And we talked about it, and I talk about access policy and action. Well, they needed access to immediate resuscitation. There should have been a policy that prevented that lack of information and action. Really, the action would have been to begin chest compressions. Simple things can be done that we would recommend prior to the arrival of a fire truck that can make a critical difference in whether somebody returns to normal living or not.
So this propelled you to pursue this. You created the foundation, or maybe just before you created the foundation, you connected with Beatitudes Campus. And I want you to take this from here, and Michelle, jump in
Sure.
at any point in time, because they were your first test subject, if you would, the first model, the beta. Tell me how this all came to be.
Well, as I mentioned in the last segment, and then I would ask Michelle to reflect on our relationship and what all of this conversation and these solutions means to Beatitudes Campus. But as I mentioned, I was frustrated, as you might imagine, and Phoenix Fire EMS Division said if somebody is going to be an example of best practice, I would start with Beatitudes. So I have to say, at that point, I was thrilled to meet Michelle and her executive staff, and we bat 1,000 on that day. And I'll leave it to Michelle to talk about what our accreditation program at her
How long
campus
ago
means.
was that?
3.5, 4,
Yeah,
4 years.
4 years.
So about 2014.
Yeah, we didn't just do this yesterday.
Good.
This is a long partnership. I remember the day he came in, and you picked up on his passion. And we had a second meeting. The first one was just him telling us about his frustrations, and our staff also explaining a lot of the rules and regulations we have under Department of Health Services. And so it kind of became this education point for both of us. We had a follow-up meeting. I remember sitting in my office. I know we were sitting around my round table, and he told me that story again. And I remember saying to him, we get into this field because we don't want things to happen like that. We want to educate families. We want to educate the resident on the advanced directives, and how can we as staff and society not let that happen anymore. And this conversation, I think we had a 2.5-hour meeting in that first time, and talked about how we could best partner. So
I know we're getting up or really close to halftime here. So I want to just say, as we break for the half, if you're not familiar with Beatitudes Campus, definitely look them up. What's the phone number that they can reach you guys at?
602-995-6100.
And your location's on Glendale Avenue. What's the address?
It's 1610 West Glendale Avenue.
And been around how long?
53 years.
53 years.
Long history in the Valley.
And I'm going to tell you, they are a model CCRC, continuing care retirement community, that not only we follow here in Arizona, but They are known throughout the country. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the innovations that they have had and they've brought to light and that have been mimicked in other communities throughout the valley as well as throughout the country. Halftime here at Health Futures. We're about ready to take a break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
How mama used to clean somebody else's house just to buy me.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. We're in our second half here, and if you're just tuning in, I have got Steve Wagner. He is the founder and president of Right Care Foundation. And I've got Michelle Just, who is the president and CEO of Beatitudes Campus. And you can find this show and about 200 others right up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button up on the top. The third button down is the radio show, and you'll be able to catch the whole first half that, unfortunately, you may have missed. And you'll catch this second half. So when we left off, we were talking just real quickly about Beatitudes Campus and what you guys have done, 53 years. You guys are a model campus that many others here in the Valley as well as throughout the country not only admire but modeled themselves after. You created a concept, a program called Comfort Matters that is in how many locations now?
22. It may be 25 by the end of this month.
All right, so possibly 25, and that's a program that really helps people with dementia and Alzheimer's and the type of care that's being delivered. And I really want to talk a little bit about you, Michelle, as we tee it up. Michelle, you've been with Beatitudes Campus. I know you said 16 years. You've been a firefighter, 14 or 15 with Phoenix Fire. You're about the same, right?
I actually have Steve beat by 2 years. I've been at the campus for 18 years now,
and
in the CEO role for 4.
So she's the CEO for 4. She replaced somebody that was legendary, that was there for many, many years.
Wonderful lady. And
she also is a great example of somebody that worked from the bottom up. And, for our listening audience that is out there listening in, I know a lot can be said about millennials, and Michelle looks like a millennial, and I know she's not.
I am not, but thank you.
But, a lot of hard work goes a long way, and a lot of people think that I can't be that president and CEO. She is a living example because when she came in, what level did you come in 18 years ago?
I started as a director of marketing for our
So she was a marketer, and now she is leading one of the premier CCRCs, not only here in Arizona, but in the country.
Thank you.
So I'm going to pivot and toss it over to you to talk a little bit more about Right Care and how you guys came together. And
Great.
I know you have some stories as well you'd like to share.
I do. I'm glad you talked a little bit about Comfort Matters because that's an accreditation program of how organizations like ours can care for those living with dementia. And it's very innovative. It was probably a 19-year journey, lots of grant funding to do all the data behind it. But in our culture is very much this culture of innovation. And so it kind of ties to Steve's work because as we started talking, we wanted to work on this pilot together and really try to innovate the field and develop best practices. So in our first meeting, actually our second meeting then, we started planning out what this program was going to look like and how can we best train our first responders. So we have a security around our campus, and they're trained as first responders and first aid. So we really launched the program with just them. And Steve worked hand in hand with them. We worked on policies. What we also wanted to do is really improve the communication between the fire department and staff so that they were very connected when they came on. Our first responders had all the information. If we needed to start chest compressions or use a AED, we would. Steve was kind enough to donate an AED to our campus for our staff.
Can you share with our listening audience what an AED is?
I'm going to let Steve say it.
Automated external defibrillator.
There we go.
It's one of those things for our listening audience. It's when we watch those doctors or medical shows, they say, clear, that's it.
That we get it.
Okay.
Yes, but easier to use, I'd say, very self-explanatory.
Yes.
So he donated one of those to us. And actually, probably 3 years ago, our first responders had to use it on a resident. She wanted to be resuscitated. While she did pass the next day, it did allow her to say goodbye to her family.
Oh, God, that's
and
priceless.
so that was, it was at that moment that we knew that we needed to expand this program even more. So over the last year, we have actually trained, had Steve and his team come in and train every single one of our staff members how to use an AED, what do chest compressions look like, how to do it correctly. You get tested. When you first walk in the door, you go through their training, you get tested again to make sure that you've learned something and how to do it correctly. But all 425 of our staff have been trained in that now. And it's not just for our own residents, but that's something they can now take out into the community, use in their own homes, use when they're in a restaurant, whatever it may be.
Or another staff member.
Or another staff member.
You got 425
Absolutely.
staff members. So can you give our listening audience an idea of some of the staff that you have? We're talking about dining room staff. We're talking about housekeeping.
Maintenance. Myself, I was trained in this. So executive staff to caregivers, all of our Beatitudes at Home staff, which is our non-medical supportive care program. So everyone, receptionists, everyone.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
And that was just something very important. After we saw just how satisfied our first responder staff felt when they were able to save that woman's life in using the AED, and then how grateful for her family was.
Right.
That was something that just took it to a next level. And I remember calling Steve the next day, and I said, they just used it, and they saved a life, and we're in this. And so I think it's important to always lift up Steve and his passion in this work, and that's why I go on these radio shows and talk about his work, because I think it's something that we should all be doing.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And what a great beta. What a great test, sample, if you would, because you have one of the premier campuses here in the Valley that is doing this, and 425 people. How long did that take, Steve, to get them all trained and doing this?
Well, the better part of the last year,
Right.
with coordinating schedules and such. But yeah, the issue is that anybody on the Beatitudes campus can save a life, and they understand that taking immediate action is the key to that before the fire truck arrives.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
No, you're welcome.
Thank you for sharing. So now we got Beatitudes up and running. What is going on with the Right Care Foundation? What are you guys doing?
Well, we are very excited because we're working not only in the nonprofit sector, but in the for-profit sector. And I'm not going to drop any names, but we have a number of organizations that have now realized through this ongoing demonstration project that this works. It makes their residents feel safer in community. It provides a means by which the campus employees communicate better with first responders, and it saves lives and honors wishes. And as we continue to promote this, I can just tell you that I think we're finally at the point where the assisted living and skilled nursing care industry in general is embracing this concept of, hey, we can do something. We can do a number of things pretty simply that can make a difference in somebody's life, and we're excited to be announcing, hopefully not in the too distant future, that we'll have a great deal of engagement with other campuses. And if it wasn't for Michelle and the Beatitudes campus proving that this is a worthwhile program, we may not be where we are today.
Without a doubt. And I'm on your website right now, and and you're absolutely right. Michelle and Beatitudes Campus of Care should be commended for embracing what you've created here, and now it's time to propel this into something much larger. And I'm up on your website, and this is a really simple website to follow. Love it. I mean, I'm looking at your board of directors, your advisory group. You can donate now too, which is really nice. And I actually know a name or two that has donated here. So I listen. You know what? No shameless plugs here. So go ahead. Rightcare.org. Hit the donate now button, right?
Absolutely, yeah. www.rightcare.org. And we have some institutional funders for programs, but we, as any nonprofit, we're always in need of funding for capacity. We need automated external defibrillators. We need
what does each
training.
one of those cost?
Well, they range somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 roughly.
Okay.
So we look to engage folks for funding. We look to engage folks to get involved. We look really to engage folks like community leaders like Michelle that will engage in our accreditation program. That's another means of funding. That's a fee-for-service program that provides protocols, et cetera, and equipment. So what I'd like to do, and thank you for the plug again, www.rightcare.org. But Bob, I really want to tell, we talked about a sad story, and now we talked about a great program. I'd like to talk about a story of survival.
Can we do that in the fourth segment? Because I know we're just winding down, but I do want to read, if I can, from your website.
Sure.
Right Care Foundation has a Bill of Rights. And
Yes, they do.
And I love it. The right to immediate resuscitation, the right to choose, the right to continuum care, the right to quality care. You can pick up on this. I love that. Every one of us has this right. And we won't know if we have that right unless we get immediate action. And, we talked about advance directives and, appointing an advocate and making your wishes known. But you also, if someone goes down, you need to be able to keep that brain alive, as you say, till the fire truck gets here. Well, we're being taken out by a little bit of Bruce Springsteen and a little bit of baseball. The Diamondbacks are something to be talked about. They're having a great start, and let's hope they can keep it up. We're down 3 segments. We got one more to go. I've got Right Care Foundation and Steve Wagner in the studio, and I've got Beatitudes Campus, Michelle Just here. Stay around. We'll be back for our 4th segment just in a minute.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress HomeCare Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and we're in our 4th segment. It's hard to believe. Time is just flying by. If you're just tuning in, I got Steve Wagner, who is the president and founder of Right Care Foundation, and I've got Michelle Just, who is the president and CEO of Beatitudes Campus. And I do want to say this. Michelle, I just went to your website. Wow.
Thank you.
And I asked you if it was new, and it's how new?
Roughly 2 weeks.
2
the
weeks.
launch of our new logo. Yep.
And I'm going to tell you, it is easy to navigate. And yes, you need to go down to the campus to see it if you have a loved one, a friend, somebody that might be interested in continuing care, retirement communities like Beatitudes. But wow, the pictures are amazing. Patio homes, exercise. It says, be engaged, be active, be well. Really, kudos, well done. So that everyone knows, it's beatitudescampus.org. So, Steve.
Yes.
The show is about you. Michelle and I have talked about it. It's about Right Care Foundation. Yeah. It's about somebody that was very passionate about a situation that should not have happened. And this was born. This was born in your mind, and then you had this petri dish over at Beatitudes that you were able to use as your beta, your test, and you got 425 workers over there that are trained in this. I'm going to toss it back to you.
Well, what I'd like to do is talk about a story of success. We talked in an earlier segment about some of the catastrophic results that can happen without immediate action and resuscitation without a program like our accreditation program at Beatitudes. But I'd like to talk about a young man in his early 40s that suffered sudden cardiac arrest. And I'll make this story brief. The good news in this story is his wife was initiating immediate resuscitation, as we call it, or chest compression. She had the phone line open with the 911 dispatcher, helping and guiding her to do the right thing to keep his brain alive before I showed up on a fire truck. We did all of the stuff, as I mentioned before, that we're trained to do, but our focus was primarily on making sure that this gentleman's brain was oxygenated. This happened on December 7th, and I'm excited to report through the entire process and electrical shocks and an emergency room, ICU visit, all of that this gentleman went home to his family before Christmas. So this is what can happen when a program like our accreditation program at Beatitudes for somebody in their 40s or 50s or 60s that wants to return to normal living. It can happen, but it won't happen without community and without industry being involved in the process as first responders. So I'm happy to report it's happened in my career more than once, and that's what I'll hang on my wall when I retire from the fire department. Quite frankly, is we have the ability to return people to normal living, and that's a tremendous gift. But we can only do that when community is involved.
And, Michelle said in the third segment about, actually having one of their workers at Beatitudes campus resuscitate somebody. And while she did, this person passed away. A day later, she got a chance to visit with all her loved ones. And that in itself is a gift.
Absolutely. And it was stories like that and watching how the team was so proud of themselves that I kept talking to Steve about, we got to get this out of just this industry. Like, how do we take it out to that broader community? So why don't you talk a little bit about how you're expanding this even more?
Well, so in the spirit of taking our program of saving lives and honoring wishes out into community, we did a little bit of research, and we found out that depending on the zip code that you live in, you may have an 20-time greater opportunity based on your zip code for the availability of resuscitation and resuscitative equipment. And we believed, as I think we all of your listeners would agree, your zip code shouldn't determine your ability to survive. So we created our public access resuscitation program that is successfully operating within the City of Phoenix Housing Department. We donated through funding with one of our institutional funders for 20 automated external defibrillators, and we provided training for hundreds of folks within that program. So expanding that, working with other funders, we have a program to bring numerous pieces of automated external defibrillator equipment and training into South Phoenix. South Phoenix is one of a number of underserved populations where resuscitation isn't really available to the folks that live, work, sleep, eat, and pray in that community. So we believe that health equity is a large part of what is important in our community, and so we hope to expand on that program. We hope to continue to get funding, but we've got a lot of work to do to make resuscitation available and accessible to everybody, regardless of the zip code you live in.
Well, I'll tell you what, Michelle, the man is passionate.
Yes, he is.
And he wants to change the world.
Yep.
And, it's saving lives one at a time. And you are to be commended, Steve. I mean, I knew I liked you when I first met you. I remember when you went on this crusade to save the world, so to speak. And I love where you're at. And certainly, I hope our listening audience is tuning in, because this is a skill that everybody can do. Mm-hmm. It just takes a little bit of training, and we need some money. And money makes this thing work, and that's why you set this up as a not-for-profit, and that's why I gave you the shameless plug of rightcare.org, right? www.rightcare.org. Any final comments, Michelle, that you would like to make as we wind down our show?
I too would like to say how incredibly I continue to be incredibly impressed with Steve and his passion. And I would say if anyone has an opportunity to meet him, you pick up on it very quick. And I would hope that people would go to the website and donate. It's hard to start a not-for-profit. And this is Steve and his wife and a small team that are keeping this going. And their support to help spread this education across the city is going to be important. So I would just hope that people would learn more about it.
He has a full-time job.
Yes, he does.
He's the guy that's running into buildings when we're all running out.
That's right.
And I know for a fact that he's had Right Care Foundation incorporated or set up structurally for a couple years now. And
well, it's been longer than that, but
and you have not made one dime. You've put a lot of your own hard-earned money in, and you've told me you and your wife have, and she keeps telling you, "What are we doing here?" And you're doing great. Yeah. And I'm proud to call you my friend. I'm glad to have you here on the show. I know Michelle is really proud to do the same and
Absolutely.
endorse you. So thank you, Steve, for all you do. And is there a phone number you want us to reach out to, or is the website really the best?
Well, all of my information is available on the website, but I would ask your audience, if anybody wants to hear more directly from me, they can reach me at 602-614-0069, 602-614-0069. But if I'm on duty, the easiest way to get a hold of me might be to email me at swagner@rightcare.org.
Love it. And Michelle,
Thanks for
really,
having me.
Beatitudes Campus, the website's amazing. You're a not-for-profit as well.
We are.
And you do accept donations. But I will tell you, go out to that website, visit it. If you've got a loved one, friend, family member that is looking for that next step in their life and they need some assistance, Beatitudes Campus is a great destination. I want to thank you both for joining us here today.
Thank
Make
you
it a great day. Have a great weekend. And listening audience, you had a real treat here today. You had a man with passion. He's out to save lives. Take care now. We'll be back next week.
There's no place like home. You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress HomeCare Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit cypresshomecare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.